Today I'm resetting a succulent bed in my garden using mostly free plants and cuttings. This channel is called Free Plants Forever, so I really focus on gardening with plants that I've gotten from cuttings or have grown from my own plants, trying to do really low budget gardening in a practical way. So my front garden here, it's full of succulents. We are in California, so it's very important to have a drought tolerant garden. Succulents are a perfect choice for us, and they're actually really easy to grow and propagate. And almost all of my garden, I've gotten my plants for free, even these giant agave blue Americanas. That was a find on Facebook Marketplace. A lot of these aeoniums and aloes here, those were left out from neighbors. Some of these echeveria here, they were in the clearance section at Home Depot. Almost all of my garden I have put together for free. And I feel like that's important to note because I had so many of these aeoniums. They grow so prolifically. They get really big when they're happy. And so it was great filler for my yard when I was first planting it. But now they've taken over. They got too big, and I have lots of other plants now. In the couple of years that I have been working in this garden, I have a lot of other plants that will look even better and make this garden a little bit more exciting. This is a succulent bed in my front yard, which I should have done a before video, but I didn't. It was pretty overgrown with a lot of these aeonium voodoo. Here's another area of my yard where these aeoniums are. And as you can see, when they fill in, they really take over. They get really tall. And it's fine for height and sort of architecture of a succulent bed when it's farther away or you have other tall plants. But over in this area of the garden that I'm resetting, they had really taken over. Here's all the ones I already pulled out and cut from earlier. There's even some kind of in, as you can see, I had a ton in here. And I felt like this was a great opportunity to make a video about kind of choosing plants for a bed like this, making sure that, you know, keeping in mind how they're going to grow later on and making them more aesthetically pleasing. So I want to show you an example of another bed that I did earlier and how I want to do kind of the same principle in this new garden bed. So if we move from this path across the way to over here, this is another succulent garden bed I put in probably about a year ago, and I feel like this is a great example because these were all clearance plants or cuttings, and they've filled in really nicely. I'm pretty sure I did a video about it. I'll link it if I have. But here in this bed, and I think what I want to focus on in the other area is my choice of plants. I realized that, you know, as a garden goes up, what makes it interesting is having layers. So the plants at the start of this path are always going to be a bit low. We have a bunch of just different kinds of echeverias. These are ghosties or graptopetalatum. This is a Graptovaria Fred Ives. This is a very large Echeveria lilac frost is what that's called. We have some aloe. We have some kalanchoe. Lots of different things, but it's very important to note that the stuff at the start of the path is going to stay low. They're more like spreading succulents as opposed to the aeoniums, which grow tall. And I think that is the main thing to point out about my plan for the next garden is choosing those plants which will go height-wise low to high to add some visual interest. And I should note as well, one of the first things I did in this garden when we moved in, we had this log, and I just chose a bunch of really cute succulents to make a little succulent bed. We need to like add a few things in there, but I feel like that's the perfect place to make that extended down this path. So what I did is I pulled out all of these aeoniums that were probably about 2 or 3 feet in height up to the path. So I pulled them all out and I trimmed them. I did this last night in the evening. So I trimmed them and now they've calloused over. And it's really important to note that these types of aeoniums, they propagate so easily. So I'm not going to throw this away. I'm going to simply stick it in the soil like I did this one back here. You can actually see behind there, there's an aeonium I didn't take out. So this entire bed was full of these kind of scraggly looking aeoniums, and they just look a little bit, as the other garden YouTuber that I love, Laura Eubanks, says, runamucky. There's also, I think these are a type of crassula. A lot of them flowered and they start to look a little bit terrible when they flower. So we're going to reset them, but we're just going to really plan it by any of the tall things are going to be placed at the back, and then much lower growing succulents go here at the front. When you're working with succulents like this, sometimes it can be really intimidating pulling them out of the ground, but honestly they do really well from propagating and repropagating. So here's a great example. This one was already replanted before. I pulled it out just to show you, but you can see how it just grows roots so easily. So I know I'm pretty safe to just simply stick that back in the soil. It's pretty impossible to kill a lot of succulents. So I'm simply gonna start just filling this bed back in with these aeoniums. And if you're wondering what these are drip irrigation lines, which are the perfect thing to have if you have a succulent garden. These I can move to different spaces because these don't need to be watered all the time. So these tall ones are going to go back here. All I'm doing to plant these is just making a little hole in the ground, and it's really only enough to like hold them up and support them. You don't need to bury them too deeply. And when it reroots itself, the roots are going to come out of the nodes, which are these little dots that formerly held leaves. And with aeoniums, they root all the way down the stalk of the plant, not just the base. Depending on the succulent, sometimes the roots come straight out the bottom. In the case of aeoniums, they come all along the side there. This is annoying me, so I'm just gonna pull it out. It's not looking great, so I'm gonna cut it here. I think it'll actually be much happier. I'm gonna cut it shorter and then stick that into the soil. And you know what? Same with this one. I also know if I cut this one here further down, it's gonna grow, have more growths out this way. So I feel like cutting this just seems like the right thing to do. Make it shorter, a little bit nicer looking. And one thing I didn't mention about aeoniums before is they do drop a lot of bottom leaves. They go dormant in the summer, so a lot of these leaves curl up, dry, and then they fold in on themselves. It's just a little protective measure. So when you're resetting them, it's always good to pull off those dry, dead bottom leaves. And while most of these were cut yesterday and calloused over, and I would usually recommend callousing a succulent before you plant it in the soil, this soil's dry. I'm not gonna water it for a few days. We're in California. The risk of rain is 0. So they're probably okay. They're not gonna rot if you put it in there. It's not wet soil. So that is something to bear in mind if you're in a climate where the soil stays moist or it's gonna rain. Let those callus for a day or two. And that means just to dry up the end. And I almost feel like we're done with the aeoniums. I just want them at the back, and I'm gonna leave this front bed nice and open. I'm gonna remove all these bigger ones. Either find another place to plant them or put them in a giveaway box in my front yard for somebody else to enjoy. You know, I do tend to not want things to look too patterned, if that makes sense. I want it to look natural, but I think there is something about using groupings of colors almost like a ribbon. So I'm gonna do these crassulas like a ribbon, I think here, and then we can fill in the other plants in between. If I put a tall one here, it's kind of leading the eyes up to this euphorbia sticks on fire. So we're gonna put that there, and it will grow taller too. And that's something that's important to bear in mind, is what are they gonna develop into? Now, again, don't overly stress about what it's gonna look like later, because you can always reset it, which is exactly what we are doing here today. I have also not added any extra soil. This is the soil that was here already because it seems relatively healthy. It's soft, it's not overly hard, like clay-like. You know, this is also about budget gardening. If my soil was full of clay, I would probably supplement it with a different ground soil. You know, you might want to add some cactus and succulent mix to help it be really more succulent friendly. Just bear in mind what your own soil is like. Succulents do not do well with hard clay soil. They need it to be pretty loose, as this is. There's a lot of products out there that help break up clay soil so that it's better for plants like this. So that's step 2 complete. I've got my crassulas and my aeoniums in. So now I'm gonna go around my garden and look for what plants I already have that will stay low and spreading. So it's been about a week since I pulled out everything in this bed, and I'm just gonna go through and start picking out plants that I have in my garden that I think would work really nicely in a succulent bed. And let's just see what we have rather than going and buying stuff. I had a bunch of copper tone sedum that I had kind of squirreled away in this pot, and you can see it has not had enough sunlight, which is why it's stretching and very green, but this is perfect to add to my new bed. This is where it came from originally, so this is what it will look like when it gets some nice bright direct sunlight. And then I also have more of these. This is called the California Sunset, right there in the middle. I have more of these that are also really green. They turn that lovely coral pink color. So I'm gonna add those to my bed. These are the California Sunsets when they don't get much color. They go really green. I might grab some from here. As you can see, some are hidden in there, and I have other plants in my garden. It's looking a little overgrown right now, in other areas that aren't doing so well. So this could be the perfect opportunity to take them out and put them somewhere where they're gonna get paid a little more attention to. So over here, I mean, this looks terrible. And here, under here are some echeverias and some little jelly bean sedums that are just absolutely parched. And some Graptivaria Fred Ives. They're just not looking good. Everything here is looking pretty bad. We had a really bad heat wave. So I'm gonna pull these out and reset them in my other bed. And I think they'll look much better and be happier. Like, that is a very, very thirsty succulent. All right, here's my first batch of plants I've picked out of other areas of my garden. I mean, I'm obviously not gonna plant this as it is. I'm gonna trim everything up because this doesn't look good, but this will look quite cute once it's planted in. And then we will just start to fit everything in here. I also have some other sedum that's much more kind of like ground cover, and I'm gonna put that more towards the front and filling in with everything. It will probably get overgrown and things will change size, and then we'll change it up. So that's okay. That's the beauty of all gardens. So I have been slowly filling in this space with plants that I have throughout my garden. Lots of little echeverias that I had, some ghosties. This is a little agave that apparently does well in low lighting situations. Not that this is like crazy low light, but it doesn't get a ton of direct light. And then I had some echeverias that came from Costco, actually. This is the perfect situation to fill in these echeverias because they're never gonna grow very tall. They're gonna stay pretty low in a bed, which is exactly what we're looking for. And what's cool about echeverias as well is they pup out really easily. Here's a pup, here's another. This is like kind of a flowering pup, but I'm gonna cut that, and they're beautiful colors. I just love a good rainbow succulent, and I think that will look really nice here. So what I've done so far is I snaked some of these copper tone sedums. They're really green right now because they haven't been in here very long and they're not exposed to a lot of light. They'll go way more orange. These are Graptivaria Fred Ives. They also go very pink when exposed to more bright sunlight. These echeverias stay pretty blue, as do these. They're different varieties, same kind of plant. So let's put these ones in. I'm gonna pull them out of the pot. I'm doing this one-handed. Let's remove all these bottom leaves and the leaves that aren't looking very good, because that's where mealybugs like to hide. And this little pup, I'm just gonna pull that off. I cleaned this echeveria up. You can see mostly where I mostly removed all the dead leaves, and you can see all the little roots growing out of the stem. So I'll bury this deeper. I've saved some of those leaves here, and I'm gonna try and propagate these. They did get some sun damage, but overall they look relatively healthy. And I'm going to clip this off as well and figure out, I can probably propagate all these little leaves. And now I'm gonna add my echeveria in here. It's kind of large, so I'm gonna make it almost like another focal piece, and then we'll put the smaller plants around. So I'm also hoping these little sedums will take as a ground cover. I just kind of threw them in here. Here's our bed so far. I have those echeverias in. I think I might add one more. And then I have a bunch of aloes that I think will be really nice right around here. And then I think we're nearly there. So these are a little small clumping aloe I got at Home Depot for $2.50. I also have another aloe. This one, these are the same ones. I found this just broken on a sidewalk. Slightly paler green, but also equally cute. So aloe are pretty interesting because their roots don't normally go very deep. They spread out really wide and shallow, and that's how they're very drought tolerant. But they also create pups, which are so easy to propagate. So all these little nubs here, sticking out of here, these you can just pull off, and if the roots come, then they come, and if not, it's no big deal, because they will just repropagate. So all of these are new plants coming off of this mommy plant, and that's where all these came from. These are all pups. So you can see I've had this, I propagated this in nice sandy succulent mix. That's it. And then I'm just gonna plant this in here. And look at all those roots spreading out. Been a couple of weeks since I started replanting this bed, and in just those couple of weeks you can see some of my plants, like these crassulas, have already started some new growth. They're really happy about being chopped back. This is one of the things I love about succulents. You chop them back and they start regrowing really nicely. Here's another example. The little echeverias seem to be happy enough in place here. Here is a little cutting of my Aeonium sunburst that I put in, some of the little sedums. They are indeed, you can tell they are taking root because they look kind of plump and fresh. Not all of them. So this one you can tell is not rooted. It's kind of dried out. I'll just pop it back in there, but they grow and fill in so quickly, so I'm not too worried. So it looks pretty sparse right now, but it will start to grow in. You can see where my drip irrigation has been coming through, and here is the agave perii, also known as artichoke agave. I rescued this. I even have a video about this being rescued. Popped it in here. It's looking pretty happy. This was the existing aloe that was in here, and all these other little echeverias, graptivarias that I popped in. They all seem to be popping in nicely. Let's see. Yep. Little roots are coming out, so everything should start to fill in here. And I might add a few more. So I have so many of these little graptivaria ghosties. I might pop them in here to really fill it out. These plants will start to grow bigger and fill in, so sometimes there's a little danger in overfilling it, but I think for now, I'm really excited about how this succulent bed has turned out. Yeah, so here, this is just a propagation box that my cat tipped over, so it's kind of falling apart, but look, I have a ton of these ghosties that I propagated from leaves. They are the perfect thing to go in and fill out the spaces between those plants. Here's another propagation box that I have that there's some more of those ghosties. This is more what you want a propagation box to look like. You can see lots of leaves that are down there, lots of little baby plants. So I can grab some of those as well, as that's what this is for, creating new little plants for me to use and put throughout my garden. And now with that, our succulent bed is complete.
Many months later.
So I first filmed this video back in November 2024. It is now May 2025. So I want to show you how the garden has changed and how it looks now, almost 6 months later. I'm going to start on this end where the little succulent tapestry starts. We didn't really do anything with that garden bed. We filled in here. And as you can see, everything has grown in and almost overgrown in, I could say. This large aloe has actually really, it's almost like fallen over. It's kind of growing out horizontally. So I'm going to remove that, but underneath it you can see how the bed has really filled in. Here are all the little copper tone sedums and then the little tiny sedums that eventually took. We have our ghosties, and then back underneath, all these aeoniums that were cut, they have kind of filled in a little bit too much. So I'm gonna remove them again when I remove this aloe. I'm gonna remove these, but there's those little aloes that were under there, our agave, the agave perii. As you can see, it is getting completely covered by these other plants that have taken over, but the sedum looks pretty happy. You can see that's really nice and lush, and it's filled in, and all these other echeverias and aeoniums and crassulas are just pretty happy in here. Now we have kind of seasonal nasturtiums that start to get really overgrown in this yard, and as you can see, they've taken over where these little crassulas are. But overall, this bed, well, it is a little bit thirsty. I'm looking at places that do need some water. It is looking really good, and I'm really happy with how it really is this nice flow across of colorful succulents. So I'm really happy with the choice of colors that we made and how everything has started to fill in. And like I said, change is inevitable. Of course, we were gonna have to like cut things back again, but it was pretty low effort for something that looks pretty nice. Thank you for joining me in creating this succulent garden bed. If you have any questions or comments, please pop them down below. I like to reply to almost every comment that I get. You can also find me on Instagram and TikTok, and don't forget to subscribe.